found out we had exactly the same birthday. I blurted out, I'm going to be the father of your children. She looked at me. I've heard a lot about you. I guess it's all true.
Michael Douglas, a name intertwined with more than half a century of Hollywood history. From the young inspector in the streets of San Francisco to the greedy tycoon Gordon Gekko in Wall Street or the fallen man in Fatal Attraction, he has left behind a string of performances that remain etched in the memories of audiences worldwide. 2 Oscars, an Emmy, multiple Golden Globes, all of it is just the tip of the iceberg. Because behind that dazzling spotlight lies a life marked with cracks. A childhood absent of his legendary father, Kirk Douglas, yet overshadowed by him. A first marriage that lasted more than 2 decades in silence, only to collapse. A son who fell into drugs and prison, leaving his father with a guilty heart. And then Michael Douglas himself, facing late-stage cancer, at one point nearly losing his voice, the vital instrument of his career. Yet with iron will, he not only survived, but was reborn. He found love with Zeta Jones, rebuilt his family, and began walking slower, more peaceful steps after the storms. At 80, Michael Douglas no longer needs applause to prove himself. He exists as a symbol of endurance, of the ability to rise after collapse, and of an artist's life that has encompassed both glory and sorrow. Have you ever considered that behind the cold gaze of Gordon Gekko or the charming smile of Nick Curran lies a soul that has endured loss, tragedy, and redemption? Michael Kirk Douglas was born into a legendary Hollywood family, yet from early on tasted loneliness, the absence of affection, and the crushing weight of his father's shadow. It was precisely that childhood that planted the seeds of both the pain and the hunger that would follow him throughout his life. Early life. Michael Kirk Douglas was born on September 25, 1944, in New Brunswick, New Jersey, into a family where the spotlight seemed predestined. His father, Kirk Douglas, was then just taking his first steps in Hollywood, but would soon become one of the brightest stars in American cinema. His mother, Diandra, was an actress and model from Bermuda, raised in a family steeped in military tradition, discipline, and public service. From birth, Michael carried the weight of 2 legacies: the dazzling light of the silver screen and the stern expectations of family duty. Yet behind that glamorous backdrop, Michael's childhood was far from peaceful. In 1951, when he was just 7 years old, his parents divorced. The fracture left an indelible scar. Michael lived mostly with his mother and later with his stepfather, William Darrad, a gentle screenwriter who provided what Kirk Douglas never could: warm presence at the dinner table, support on school days, and the comfort of everyday fatherhood. Michael would later admit that it was Darrad who felt like his real father during those years when he longed most for closeness. Kirk Douglas, by contrast, loomed large in a colder, more distant way. On the rare occasions when Michael visited his father's film sets, he witnessed the bustle of crews surrounding Kirk, the bursts of laughter, the glare of camera lights. But in the midst of that noise, the boy felt lonelier than ever. "My father was more of a concept than a real dad," Michael would confess. He grew up with empty chairs at holiday dinners, phone calls that never came, and a gnawing need to be recognized not merely as Kirk Douglas's son. His maternal family in Bermuda instilled in him a different sense of identity, discipline, and duty. His grandfather, Colonel Thomas Melville Dill, had served as Attorney General and commander of the Bermuda militia. That legacy impressed upon Michael that survival required self-reliance, hard work, and resilience. Michael was educated at prestigious schools, Allen Stevenson in New York, Eaglebrook in Massachusetts, and Choate Rosemary Hall in Connecticut. At each stop, he carried the burden of expectation and harsh comparisons. To classmates, he was not Michael, but Kirk Douglas's boy. Seeking escape, he threw himself into drama clubs. On the school stage, in the skin of minor student characters, he discovered the only place where he could simply be himself. At the University of California, Santa Barbara, he chose to study drama, not out of some blazing passion, but because, as he later admitted, it was the only path that didn't make him feel small. He graduated in 1968 with a bachelor's degree, carrying with him a fierce determination. He would not live forever in his father's shadow. He would prove on his own terms that he could stand tall in the world of cinema. Michael's childhood, glamorous yet hollow, disciplined yet deprived of tenderness, became the mold that forged him. A boy raised in contradictions who turned absence into drive and scars into relentless fuel for the long career that lay ahead. Early career. Michael Douglas's artistic path was anything but smooth. Graduating from university with a degree in drama in 1968, he carried with him great ambition, but also deep anxiety. Would he forever be seen only as Kirk Douglas's son, or could he stand on his own? His first appearance on the big screen came in Cast a Giant Shadow, 1966, produced by his father, where he played a minor part as a Jeep driver. It was a nearly invisible role, yet it gave Michael his first taste of cinema's rhythm. Through the late 1960s and early 1970s, he kept working in small parts, both on the New York stage and in little-known television shows. It was a grueling period, meager paychecks, audiences who didn't remember his face, and the constant whisper that he had only gotten opportunities because of his father. The turning point came in 1972 when Michael was cast as Inspector Steve Keller in the television series The Streets of San Francisco. Across 5 seasons until 1977, Douglas appeared regularly alongside veteran actor Karl Malden, a man he regarded as his true mentor. The role lifted him out of his father's shadow, secured his place on American television, and earned him 3 Emmy nominations. Michael later admitted that it was Malden who taught him discipline and the importance of digging into the psychological depth of a character, qualities that would become trademarks of his acting style. Yet Douglas never wanted to remain confined to the image of a television star. He turned toward film production, a field where his father had once stumbled. In 1975, at the age of 31, Michael bought the rights to the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from Kirk Douglas and insisted on bringing it to the screen. A project rejected by many studios ultimately became a phenomenon. The film swept 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Michael, as producer, stood on the Oscar stage for the first time. It was a triumph both sweet and bittersweet. The son had accomplished what the famous father had failed to do. As Michael himself admitted, it was the happiest and most difficult moment of my life. That success opened an entirely new chapter. Michael Douglas was no longer just a television face. He became proof that with determination, patience, and vision, a man could step out of the shadows of the past and build his own standing. From that foundation, he began moving decisively into film, preparing for the dazzling heights of the 1980s and 1990s. Career success. If One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest gave Michael Douglas a unique standing as a young producer bold enough to realize his father's unfinished dream, then the years that followed saw him truly step into the spotlight as an independent star. The China Syndrome, 1979, where he both starred and co-produced, unexpectedly became a cultural flashpoint when the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident occurred just days after its release, turning the film into a statement on the anxieties of the nuclear age. That was when Hollywood realized Douglas was not only capable of embodying characters, but also possessed a rare instinct for stories that echoed society's deepest fears. The 1980s elevated Michael into the ranks of A-list actors. With Romancing the Stone, 1984, and The Jewel of the Nile, 1985, he created the swashbuckling, witty adventurer Jack Colton, a character that won over mass audiences and proved he could carry box office blockbusters. Yet he did not settle for easy charm. Just a few years later, Douglas released 2 defining performances: Dan Gallagher in Fatal Attraction and Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, 1987. One was an adulterous man trapped in a psychological nightmare, the other a cold-blooded Wall Street icon whose line, "Greed is good," became legendary. Gekko earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor, but together the 2 roles carved out the Michael Douglas brand. Complex men, driven by desire, teetering on the thin line between power and downfall. After these triumphs, Douglas kept pushing boundaries. He chose The War of the Roses, 1989, a dark marital comedy that stripped love bare with merciless honesty. He took on Black Rain, 1989, diving into Japan's underworld through the eyes of an American cop. Entering the 1990s, Douglas became the face of films probing society's deepest anxieties. In Basic Instinct, 1992, he was a detective consumed by a mysterious femme fatale, blurring the lines between lust and danger. In Falling Down, 1993, he portrayed a middle-aged man exploding under urban social pressures, a haunting portrait of the collapse of the American dream. Disclosure, 1994, saw him boldly tackle a controversial reversal. A man harassed by his female boss, igniting fierce debates on gender and power. These roles proved he never shied away from discomfort. Instead, he plunged into moral dilemmas, turning himself into a mirror of late 20th century conflicts. Even in softer roles, Douglas explored the loneliness of powerful men. In The American President, 1995, he played a widowed president who dares to love again amid political storms. Charming yet deeply human, a performance that revealed a warmer side. The Game, 1997, under David Fincher's direction, trapped him in a paranoid nightmare where reality blurred into illusion. A Perfect Murder, 1998, pushed him once again into morally ambiguous territory, a natural extension of the characters he had mastered. Crossing into the new millennium, Douglas shed some of his old glamour to confront the fractures of middle age. Wonder Boys, 2000, saw him as a weary, washed-up literature professor, an acclaimed performance that earned a BAFTA nomination. That same year, he starred in Traffic, which won the Oscar for Best Picture, as a drug czar torn between public duty and private family tragedy. These 2 roles did more than earn praise. They captured the anxieties of a generation of men in the age of globalization. He continued diversifying with Don't Say a Word, 2001, It Runs in the Family, 2003, featuring 3 generations of the Douglas family, The Sentinel, 2006, King of California, 2007, and Solitary Man, 2009. Each film became a variation on the same question: how must a man live when the spotlight begins to dim? When he reprised Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, money never sleeps. 2010. Douglas didn't just recall a cultural icon. He reflected on how the financial world itself had changed after the 2008 crisis. But his true rebirth came as Liberace in Behind the Candelabra, 2013. Transforming into the flamboyant, lonely, enigmatic pianist, Douglas won the Emmy, Golden Globe, and SAG Award, proving that even in his 60s he was capable of delivering a career-defining performance. Never content to rest on past glory, Douglas entered the 2010s with his trademark, daring. While many of his peers retreated backstage, he found a new stage in the Marvel superhero universe, an unexpected move. With Ant-Man, 2015, Ant-Man and the Wasp, 2018, and Quantumania, 2023, Douglas embodied Dr. Hank Pym, a brilliant, flawed scientist weighed down by loss and mistrust, now forced to pass his legacy on to a younger generation. Far from the typical wise old mentor trope, Pym was written as a complicated heart, a genius scarred by the past. Douglas infused the role with his own lived experience, giving Pym psychological depth rare in Marvel's effects-driven world. Younger audiences discovered him through this role, while longtime fans recognized in every furrowed brow and lifted chin the weight of a half-century of acting craft. Pym became a bridge between generations, both a relic and a vessel carrying Michael Douglas to new audiences. Yet his greatest late-career surprise came from television, with the Kominsky Method, 2018 to 2021. Not a multi-million-dollar blockbuster, but a small Netflix series about Sandy Kominsky, an aging actor now surviving as an acting coach. Douglas turned Kominsky into a vivid portrait of old age, witty yet weary, still craving recognition while learning to accept decline. The biting lines, moments of self-mockery, and long silences revealed Douglas himself, a man who had tasted both peaks and valleys, now using his experience to draw both laughter and tears. The show became a cultural phenomenon in the rare genre of the elderly speaking of aging. It won Douglas the Golden Globe for Best Actor in 2019, and more importantly, confirmed he was not out of place in the streaming era. On the contrary, he found a new auditorium, where those who once idolized Wall Street now faced middle age themselves and saw their own worries reflected in Kominsky. That empathy, combined with Douglas's nuanced, truthful performance, connected him with global audiences in a way unlike Marvel, not through spectacle, but through the raw truth of life. In the twilight of his career, the dual choices, Hank Pym in Marvel, Sandy Kominsky on Netflix, revealed Douglas's resilience. He proved he could still hold his ground in global pop culture while also seeking roles that tested his spirit. No longer just a survivor of classic Hollywood, Michael Douglas showed himself as an artist of constant reinvention, one who knew how to keep writing new chapters regardless of age or expectation. Over more than half a century, Douglas has amassed nearly every accolade: 2 Academy Awards, 5 Golden Globes, an Emmy, the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But more importantly, he has left behind a gallery of layered characters. Gordon Gekko, the greed symbol of the 1980s, Dan Gallagher, the cautionary tale of infidelity, Nick Curran, the taut face of dangerous desire, Sandy Kominsky, the living illustration of aging and wisdom. Each character reflected not only the society of its time, but also Douglas's own crises, hopes, and choices in each stage of his life. His career, then, is not merely a string of successful films, but a lived journey, where art, and life illuminate one another, leaving an indelible mark on cinema history. Personal life. Behind the glory of Wall Street, Fatal Attraction, or Basic Instinct, Michael Douglas had become one of Hollywood's most sought-after leading men. Yet just as his career entered its brightest period, his private life opened into a stormy chapter, beginning with his marriage to Diandra Lucer, the first woman he married and the one who left him with the deepest scars. In 1977, as his career was on the rise, Michael met Diandra Lucer, a 19-year-old from a distinguished diplomatic family. Their meeting carried both romance and a touch of history, the inauguration of President Jimmy Carter. At the time, Michael was 32, already known on television and eager to conquer cinema, while Diandra had just left school, with a refined, calm beauty very unlike the glamorous women of Hollywood. Michael was captivated at first sight, and Diandra could not hide her astonishment that a famous movie star seemed so interested in her. After only a few weeks of dating, they decided to marry, a hasty decision that Michael himself later admitted was reckless. The wedding was lavish, praised in the press as the union of a Hollywood star and a pedigreed daughter. A year later, they welcomed their first child, Cameron Douglas. Michael held the baby in his arms with the conviction that he would be different from his own father, that his son would not grow up with the same emotional void he had endured while Kirk Douglas was consumed by his career. But the early years of marriage were anything but smooth. Michael was constantly away with film projects and long shoots, while Diandra longed for a stable home and a present husband. They lived in a grand estate in Mallorca, a gift from Michael meant as a symbol of their bond. Yet the ancient stone walls and lush gardens could not fill the emotional emptiness that grew between them. Michael slipped into alcohol, drugs, and the temptations of Hollywood. Diandra, despite her efforts to preserve the family's peace, often found herself alone. Their only child, Cameron, became a silent witness to this growing distance. Michael later admitted that throughout the 1980s, he was everywhere except in my own home. Diandra, in rare comments to the press, said she often felt like nothing more than a decoration piece in her husband's life. The cracks widened into a chasm. A severe skiing accident in 1980, which might have brought them closer, only deepened the instability. By the late 1980s, their marriage was little more than a formality. They still appeared together at events, still smiled on red carpets, but behind closed doors were days of suffocating silence. Michael would later call it 2 decades of silence, not arguments, but a cold distance more devastating than conflict itself. For Cameron, that silence became a wound that never healed. He grew up in a mansion filled with luxury, but each dinner without his father, each birthday marked only by a rushed phone call, left him emptier. The greater the opulence, the deeper the void. Cameron would later confess that those years of neglect made him feel not important enough, a feeling that drove him toward drugs to fill the absence of love. When he eventually landed in prison, he pointed back to that neglected childhood as the root of his downfall, the shadow he could never escape. For Michael, it was the tragedy of his own childhood repeating itself. He had once promised never to be like Kirk Douglas, the absent father of his youth. Yet that promise shattered under the relentless pull of his career and the glare of Hollywood. Watching his son spiral, Michael not only saw Cameron in despair, but also glimpsed his own childhood reflected back at him. He called it an unhealed wound, a private failure no Oscar could erase. He admitted, "I failed." not just as a bad husband, but as a father who wasn't there. By 1995, rumors of cracks in the marriage between Michael Douglas and Diandra Lucer spread across the tabloids. Stories claimed Diandra could no longer endure his constant absence, while Michael was consumed by work, travel, and the excesses so common in Hollywood. Both kept silent, trying to maintain the image of a model family. But inside, the marriage was beyond repair. Dinners without laughter, obligatory joint trips, and Cameron growing up in the cold void between them. It wasn't until 2000, after years of quiet struggle, that they finally divorced after 22 years together. The split immediately dominated headlines and shocked Hollywood, not just because it marked the collapse of a famous family, but because of the staggering numbers involved. Diandra received a $45 million settlement, one of the largest divorce payouts in Hollywood history at the time. Along with the cash, she retained partial ownership of the Majorca estate, once their lavish family home. This later led to further legal disputes, as the villa was not just property, but a symbol of family memories and Michael's career. The press called it one of Hollywood's most expensive and explosive divorces of the 2000s. Reporters scoured every detail: Michael's cold demeanor at events, Diandra's confident public appearances with her massive fortune. Tabloid headlines turned their private unraveling into a public spectacle. The marriage to Diandra Lucer, from its glamorous beginning to its bitter end, became a chapter full of scars in Michael Douglas's life. It gave him Cameron, the son he loved, but who also became his greatest source of pain. And it taught him harsh lessons about balancing career and family. It was a marriage that even fame and fortune could not save, where glossy magazine photos of happiness were only a facade masking years of loneliness and estrangement. After his divorce from Diandra ended with cold numbers and sensational headlines, Michael Douglas entered a void. In his early 50s, he was one of Hollywood's biggest stars with a monumental filmography, yet his private life was in ruins, his marriage shattered, his son adrift, and his image as a successful man overshadowed by loneliness. In the midst of this turmoil, fate unexpectedly opened a new door. In 1998, at the Deauville Film Festival in France, Michael happened to meet Catherine Zeta-Jones, the young Welsh actress who had just made waves with The Mask of Zorro. He was 53, she only 28, a 25-year age gap that seemed insurmountable. But from the very first meeting, Michael was captivated. In a moment both impulsive and reckless, he blurted out the now famous line, "I want to be the father of your children." The bold declaration left Catherine stunned, even slightly offended, but also intrigued by the man before her. A star weathered by storms, unafraid to speak his mind at the risk of rejection. Realizing his rashness, Michael quickly sent Catherine flowers and a letter of apology, expressing sincerity and a desire to start again. That mix of boldness and humility softened her. They began to talk, their hours-long phone conversations becoming the glue that bound two souls who had both known pain. For the first time, Michael felt truly listened to, while Catherine found in him the patience and empathy she had always longed for. Just 2 years later, in November 2000, they held a lavish wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York, costing more than $1.5 million and attended by icons like Sean Connery, Jack Nicholson, and Tom Hanks. The ceremony marked not only a new chapter for Michael, but also his declaration that, after all the wreckage, he still dared to believe in love. On Catherine's hand was a vintage diamond ring, but the most priceless gift was the presence of their infant son, Dylan, a living testament to Michael's earlier words, "I want to be the father of your children." The union of a seasoned Hollywood legend and a young, dazzling starlet earned them the title Hollywood's royal couple. But for Michael Douglas, this second marriage was more than a romantic spectacle. It was a chance to make amends for past mistakes, especially in his roles as husband and father. After their dream wedding, Michael and Catherine built a family life together with the births of Dylan, 2000, and Karis, 2003. Michael once said that moving the family to Bermuda for a time was his gift to the children, a childhood shielded from paparazzi, unlike the void he had felt in his own youth. Catherine agreed. Seeing the kids ride bikes on quiet streets instead of dodging cameras, I knew we had made the right choice. But love did not spare them from storms. In 2010, Michael was diagnosed with stage 4 tongue cancer. Months of chemotherapy and radiation left him 40 pounds lighter, gaunt, and nearly voiceless. Catherine stayed by his side, but the strain tested their marriage. When Michael suggested in an interview that his cancer was linked to HPV, a sexually transmitted virus, the media twisted it into speculation about their private lives. Catherine was deeply hurt, not only by the public intrusion, but also by her husband's inadvertent exposure of their privacy. Soon after, Catherine faced her own battle. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and underwent several hospitalizations. The weight of illness, media pressure, and emotional strain led them to announce a separation in 2013. Michael walked the Deauville red carpet alone, the very place he had first met her, while Catherine sought balance in silence. Many believed it was the end. But they did not let the marriage collapse. After a time apart, Michael patiently worked to reconcile, and Catherine recognized that their love was strong enough to endure both illness and scandal. By 2014, they officially reunited, and since then, they have rarely been apart at major events. They celebrated their 15th anniversary with a return to the mountain where Michael had proposed, a reminder that true love must be nurtured through trials. Today, with Dylan and Karis grown, Michael and Catherine lead a quieter life, dividing their time between New York, Bermuda, and Majorca. Family dinners, seaside walks, or joint appearances on Broadway to support colleagues all show that they have found peace after the storms. Michael once said, "We're no longer looking for fireworks. What we've kept is the candle that still burns, even when the wind blows." Turmoil, scandals, and controversies. Michael Douglas's life, beyond the spotlight, has also been marked by scandals and upheavals that the public has never stopped discussing. From a young age, he faced the harsh temptations of Hollywood. In the 1970s and 1980s, Douglas fell into heavy drinking and indulgent habits, something he later admitted had lasting consequences for both his health and private life. On the set of Romancing the Stone, 1984, he was rumored to have had an affair with co-star Kathleen Turner, though both insisted they were only close friends. Still, his reckless lifestyle and endless parties deepened the cracks in his first marriage to Diandra Lucer. One of the most notorious and controversial chapters of Douglas's private life came in the early 1990s, when he publicly admitted himself into rehab. Unlike many Hollywood stars who chose silence or denial, Douglas openly confessed that he suffered from sex addiction, a term still unfamiliar to the public at the time. the revelation of a leading man, an Oscar winner, and the very embodiment of the American male ideal, publicly acknowledging such an intimate issue immediately became a global media storm. Tabloids exploded with sensational headlines. Some mocked him as a man unable to control his instincts. Others condemned him as a symbol of Hollywood's moral decay. Mainstream outlets also seized on the story, examining it from every angle: scientific, medical, and cultural. The incident not only damaged Douglas's public image, but also dealt a serious blow to his marriage with Diandra Lucer. Diandra herself declared in an interview that she felt their family had been destroyed by her husband's uncontrollable desires. Her words cut like a knife, publicly confirming the rift in their marriage and further tarnishing Michael's standing in the eyes of the public. To audiences, it was no longer just a celebrity scandal, but a raw family tragedy laid bare across the headlines. In 2010, when Douglas revealed he had stage 4 throat cancer, sympathy was slow to arrive before another storm broke, this time from his own words. In an interview, he stated that his illness was linked to HPV, a sexually transmitted virus. What had been meant as a public health warning was twisted into lurid speculation about his private life, with some even dragging Catherine Zeta-Jones into the narrative. The distortion left their marriage shaken. Catherine felt publicly humiliated, while Michael bitterly admitted that sometimes the truth, once filtered through the media, becomes a blade that cuts into family happiness. The turmoil did not end there. In 2018, at the height of the Me Too movement, Douglas was accused by former employee Susan Braudy of sexual harassment dating back to the late 1980s. Though no evidence emerged and no legal consequences followed, his name was swept into the storm of public scrutiny. Douglas firmly denied the allegations, calling them a complete fabrication. But the controversy forced both him and his family to endure yet another trial. Catherine admitted she was hurt and disappointed, but ultimately chose to stand by her husband, framing it as another challenge they had to overcome together. Adding to it all, Douglas's very success became its own trap. The public often conflated him with the villains he played on screen, from the ruthless Gordon Gekko in Wall Street to the adulterous Dan Gallagher in Fatal Attraction. Many believed Douglas in real life was equally cold, selfish, and debauched. He once said bitterly, "Sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I see the wary look in strangers' eyes as if I were the villain they had just watched the night before." Being boxed into those dark personas drove him into crises more than once, forcing him to fight to prove he was not merely a real-life reflection of his most infamous roles. Wealth and lifestyle. Over more than half a century at the pinnacle of Hollywood, Michael Douglas has not only amassed fame, but also built an impressive fortune, estimated at around $350 million as of 2024. Yet, if one looks closer, that value is not contained in numbers alone. It reflects a long, arduous journey, from the boy living under Kirk Douglas's shadow to a top actor and producer who learned to turn success into security for his family. Douglas owns several luxurious properties, each tied to a particular phase and choice in his life. In the heart of New York, he and Catherine Zeta-Jones have a high-end apartment overlooking Central Park, a symbol of grandeur, but also a place where they can live simply like any couple, occasionally seen dining at small neighborhood restaurants. In Bermuda, he keeps a private estate, a retreat where the family can disappear from the media's relentless gaze. Douglas once said it was there he rediscovered the childhood he had lost, complete family dinners, the laughter of his children, and a peace that Hollywood lights could never provide. Further away in Mallorca, Spain, he owns a 10-acre estate with olive groves, ancient stone walls, and sweeping views of the Mediterranean. This property is not merely real estate, but a European legacy that Douglas and Catherine intend to pass down to their children. They also maintain a $12 million home in Westchester, New York, which Douglas often describes as a quiet resting place when he is not traveling the world. Beyond real estate, Douglas is a man of speed and style. He has often been seen behind the wheel of vintage Jaguars and luxury Mercedes, openly indulging his passion for classic cars. He also has a deep love of the sea. Yachting is one of his favorite escapes, a way to find balance on the deck of a boat after life's upheavals. Looking at this fortune, one might immediately think of extravagance. But for Michael Douglas, these possessions are not mere symbols of wealth. They are sanctuaries after the storms, when illness threatened his life, when his marriage stood on the edge of collapse, or when his son wandered into darkness. The homes, the cars, the olive groves, all stand as proof that he fought, that he held his family together, and that in the end, he built his own private kingdom, quiet yet enduring. Social work, philanthropy. If his film career elevated Michael Douglas to the rank of legend, then his social and charitable work gave his name a different weight. Responsibility, humanity, and influence that extends far beyond Hollywood. Together with his father, Kirk Douglas, he co-founded the Douglas Foundation, one of the oldest and most generous charitable funds established by artists. Over the decades, the foundation has donated tens of millions of dollars to vital areas such as healthcare, education, and the arts, supporting hospitals, schools, and community cultural projects. For Michael, this was not merely about inheriting a family legacy, but also about giving back to society what he himself had received. Since 1998, Douglas has also served as a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for nuclear disarmament. In this role, he has traveled widely, from international conferences to public campaigns, urging the world to take seriously the dangers posed by nuclear weapons. A Hollywood star speaking on the global stage about peace was once surprising, but for Douglas it was a responsibility he considered no less important than acting. After publicly sharing his battle with throat cancer, Douglas also became one of the strongest voices raising awareness about cancer and men's health. He spoke of his illness not to invite pity, but to warn others, emphasizing the importance of prevention and early detection. Those words, drawn from painful personal experience, created a powerful ripple effect across the medical community and the public. Today, Michael Douglas is respected not only for his 2 Oscars or his unforgettable performances, but also for his dedication as a global citizen. He has proven that a movie star can move beyond the glow of the screen to shape awareness, spread hope, and contribute to building a safer, more humane world. Legacy and influence. Michael Douglas leaves behind a layered legacy, artistic yet deeply embedded in cultural and social dimensions. In cinema, he expanded the definition of a Hollywood leading man, not just a glamorous hero, but a flawed man torn between desire and morality, power and loneliness. Characters like Gordon Gekko in Wall Street or Dan Gallagher in Fatal Attraction became pop culture icons, reflecting the darker side of American society in the 1980s and 1990s. Douglas helped create a new language for film, where a protagonist could be both alluring and dangerous, admired and despised at the same time. Professionally, he was among the rare actors who managed to balance success both as a performer and as a producer, proving that a star could step behind the camera to create works that changed Hollywood itself. His decision to produce One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975, a film that swept the Academy Awards, was a turning point that ushered in an era where actor-producers became true power players in the industry. Douglas's influence also lives on through the generations that followed. Many younger talents, from Leonardo DiCaprio to Christian Bale, have acknowledged that his boldness in choosing scripts and his ability to embody complex characters inspired them to take artistic risks. His presence in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even in later life, carried symbolic weight. A bridge between classical Hollywood and the superhero era, showing that his appeal was never bound by time. Beyond the screen, Douglas stands as a model of personal resilience. The public has seen a man who stumbled under temptation, scandal, and illness, yet found ways to rise, heal, and keep moving forward. That image turned Douglas into a source of strength for many, not only for film lovers, but also for anyone grappling with their own struggles. In Hollywood history, few figures have been tied so closely to both brilliance and deep scars as Michael Douglas. And yet, those very scars may be the most vital part of his legacy. They made him relatable, real, and a reminder that behind every legend is a human being still trying to live fully. Present life. At 80, Michael Douglas is no longer a constant presence on screen, but his life has opened into a new chapter, quieter, deeper, yet still full of weight. In 2025, Douglas officially admitted that he had stepped away from acting. At the Karlovy Vary Film Festival in the summer of 2025, where he presented the restored version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Douglas stated bluntly, "I have no intention of returning to acting unless something truly special comes along. I've worked for nearly 60 years, and I don't want to be someone who dies on set." It was not a bitter farewell, but a conscious choice, a way of granting himself the right to rest after nearly 6 decades of dedication. Though retired from acting, Douglas has kept his creative flame alive. He continues to produce select independent projects and spend time working on his own scripts. Notably, 2025 marks an emotional milestone. Douglas and his son, Cameron, reappear together in the film Looking Through Water, set for release in the fall. The project is more than just a movie. It is a journey of healing and reconnection between 2 generations of the Douglas family, where old wounds are mended through art. Beyond cinema, Michael Douglas has not hesitated to speak out on current affairs. Also at Karlovy Vary, he warned that America was flirting with authoritarianism, criticizing how democracy had been reduced to a tool for profit. Such remarks show that Douglas is not merely a retired star, but a citizen acutely aware of social responsibility, willing to use his personal stature to add his voice. In everyday life, Douglas spends most of his time at his historic estate in Westchester, New York, or retreats to Majorca and Bermuda to find peace. He takes care of his health after years of battling cancer, keeps a routine of meditation and reading, and cherishes every moment with Catherine Zeta-Jones and their children. Cameron, now recovered and reintegrated, has become a hard-won but treasured source of pride. Dylan and Karis, the younger children, have grown up, making the family unit even closer. Douglas calls this phase his harvest time, no longer chasing the spotlight, but reaping the values he has sown, a peaceful family, a distinguished career, and a voice that still carries influence in public life. He chooses to slow down, but not to disappear. For Douglas, today is not an ending, but the most tranquil chapter of a life that has weathered every storm. What lingers from his life is not merely the roles or the awards, but the journey of a man who dared to confront darkness, overcome turmoil, and live fully with love, family, and responsibility. From a boy scarred by abandonment to a legend who knew when to stop in order to preserve peace, Douglas shows us that true strength lies in knowing when to let go and live authentically. And perhaps that is the most precious legacy he leaves behind. Not perfection, but the resilience and honesty of a human life. What about you? What do you remember most about Michael Douglas? A role, a line, or a moment from his real life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to join us on more emotional journeys into the lives of Hollywood legends.